You're It. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you, because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You're It Girl, and episode 11. We talked about relationships. Katie Kylene was on the show, and we talked about if it's possible to have healthy relationships after sexual trauma. We talked about taste testing versus manifesting your soulmate. We talked about desire and lust and love and the strong differences between those things. We talked a little bit about healing first, which we've talked about in many other episodes leading up to that episode, and healing before seeking to find your soulmate, because when we're not ready, we often attract someone that is energetically not healed as well. And you may remember from the first two episodes, if you have not listened, go back and listen to episode 1 and 2, because it sets a lot of context for what I'm going to be talking about today and for a lot of episodes as well. So if you have not listened to those, I'll give you a brief little synopsis again. I'd been with the same person, who was my husband, from age 19 until I was 32 years old. I was literally out of high school when I met him. I worked for him. He was my boss. He was married. It was super scandalous. But in a sense, at that time period in my life, he saved me from my situation at home. In a sense, he protected me from it and helped me to navigate it. He kind of took me under his wing a little bit. And there was a side of him that I didn't know. And that was that I knew that he used to drink and that then he was sober. So in my mind, he was not an addict. And we all know that my mom is an alcoholic. And so I really didn't realize that I was marrying my mom, but it makes perfect sense because I hadn't gone through any therapy at that point in time. And so, of course, I was attracted to somebody who truly was an addict and in a sense, married my mom. It makes sense. It's basically therapy 101. The things that we're not supposed to do that a lot of us do end up doing. And then later on, we end up in a relationship and we realize, oh, I'm with my dad, or oh, I'm with my mom. It's really quite common, unfortunately. And so obviously, being so young, it felt so, even though he wasn't drinking, but he was an addict, he still had those tendencies. And so really it just felt familiar and normal to me, even though he wasn't, drinking at the time. My ex-husband is what you would call, or what he would call himself during that time period, a dry drunk, which means it's somebody who doesn't drink alcohol or have a substance abuse challenge really anymore, but they haven't fully faced their shadows and done any sort of healing really. And so they have other addictive tendencies or things that go along with addiction, but they're not actually using a substance to suppress those things any longer. And so, an unhealthy, that relationship, although felt healthy, was unhealthy in so many ways, but it also felt fine and good because I was used to many of those behaviors. There's nothing more comforting to a child of an alcoholic or a child who's experienced trauma with a parent than being with someone who is very similar to that person. It's like wearing, a lot of therapists use this analogy where you put on that old shoe so many times and it has that hole in it and it's actually uncomfortable, but like you're so used to that shoe that you just keep putting it on and you keep wearing it. You don't realize that you really just need to get rid of that shoe and put on a new shoe. And as you can imagine, addiction, let me go back just a quick little second. When I was married to my husband, the one thing that he was addicted to, besides certain behaviors, was being addicted to me. And that felt really good, but was also extremely unhealthy. And after a while, you realize that that is not sustainable. And you realize that you're not being loved in a healthy way. And before I go on a little bit into more of the story, I just want to say that my ex-husband is an incredible man. One of the bravest men that I actually know. He's a devoted father. He's a man of faith. He cares immensely for others, immensely. He's the person that a lot of people call if they need help. And with where he is now in his life, because of our relationship ending, he has truly faced a lot of his shadows. He ended up relapsing and we were together and then went into recovery. And so he has overcome more than many people ever will. He's incredibly brave and has a very strong sense of courage. And he's definitely a hero in the eyes of his children and to many others because of those things that he's been able to overcome. Our relationship as husband and wife was obviously not meant to be, but our relationship as friends and as parents, as a co-parent to our daughter, is very, very special. And we are quite lucky indeed. But it's because of the work that both of us have done. When we divorced, I did the thing that most people do when they end a long-term relationship. They rebound. And I rebounded quickly. Probably too quickly. And if you've been in this situation before, if you're in your car listening to this, or you're in your house, you can raise your hand and say, yes, that's you. Because a lot of us have done this. I rebounded quickly. Again, probably too quickly because when you come out of a long-term relationship or out of a marriage, you're so used to being in a relationship. And so a relationship feels so good and you almost seek it out. But what you seek out is often the complete opposite of the person that you're with prior. Does this relate to any of you? And if you are in this situation right now, proceed with caution. And I say this because coming out of a serious relationship and ending up in another relationship right away sometimes leads to us overlooking some very important things about ourselves and some very important things about the other person that we are with, because different actually feels good in that sense and it feels refreshing. Those opposite characteristics that this new person has seem wildly attractive and so appealing. And so you just throw caution to the wind and you think it's your soulmate and you are in deep before you even fully got out of the other relationship and emotionally healed from that other relationship. And that is the challenge. And that is a challenge that a lot of us experience when we are now in a situation where now we are single or out of a relationship and exploring a new one is not fully closing the chapter to the other one. Because when a relationship ends, time should be spent feeling and healing. And I've said this so many times in other podcasts, and I remind myself of this now every day because I was one that loved to suppress my emotions. But it is important to feel, to heal. And I forgot that part. And unfortunately, oftentimes when we do forget that part, we end up doing the one thing that we try the hardest to avoid, which is hurting the other person that we are in the relationship with. And so the person that got hurt in that relationship was my partner. And it's because you're not honest with yourself, and those feelings that you want so desperately to be true are not. And this is what happened to me in that relationship. I wanted that relationship to work so badly. It was so different from the other one. And I just wanted a relationship to be so normal. And so I tried to do what Katie Kylene says you should not do. And what a lot of us try to do is force it. And you can't force love, unfortunately. And you can't force your feelings. I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever been in that situation where you want something to work so badly that you're constantly trying to convince yourself that this relationship is going to work out. And it just love doesn't work like that. It's kind of it's like that song is I can't make you love me if you don't. You can't make your heart feel something it won't. It just won't. You can't go there. I know I'm a terrible singer. I was going to try to like sing that on video and podcast, but you don't want to hear me sing. You should just listen to something in your car because I can't carry a tune. I'm tone deaf. I mean, you can't be good at everything. We all have our talents. So anyway, but I wanted to feel it. That's the thing. And on paper, I liked the vibe. I loved it on paper. I wanted to be with somebody with a similar age, and I wanted to date somebody on the same path with similar goals. I had this sort of fairy tale dream like we've all had, that like this person is that person. And I just didn't want something to be complicated, and it didn't feel complicated. And so I wanted to do everything in my power to take it to a level to where I could turn it into what I wanted. But unfortunately, when this happens, we're not honest with ourselves, and I was not honest with myself, and we were not compatible. And we looked so similar on paper, but we were so vastly different in how we viewed the world and all the people in it. We wanted a similar future, but the ways in which we wanted to get there and planned on getting there were so vastly different. And unfortunately, what happens here in these situations is it takes us far too long to realize that. And then you're really in kind of deep. And in this particular situation, I was 2.5 years in. And here's the bad part. It took me so long to figure it out that I'd actually lost a good amount of myself along the way. And if you've been in this situation, you know it's a slow start at first, compromising, giving up a little bit about what you like, what you don't like, being too agreeable, too accommodating, saying things that weren't even me until I realized I was in a relationship that wasn't even me at all. Friends noticed, my business partner noticed, colleagues noticed. Nobody said anything. They would talk about it behind my back. But guess who didn't notice one little bit? Me. I didn't notice one little bit. And I lost a lot of that like sparkly thing that you see right now, which can come back very quickly once you release yourself from those relationships. But I didn't notice until thankfully I was hit in the face with it. And I mean hard. And it was eye-opening. Have you ever been there? Realized it when you're in that relationship, you lost yourself along the way, and then you realize, I'm not even being myself. And how does it blew my mind because people always tell me, Amanda, you are, when you talk to people and when people actually know you as a person, I've never seen someone that's so comfortable being themselves. And it's so odd that I lost it because I feel that's entirely true about me. Here's how it happened. I was on a trip with some good friends, and my boyfriend at the time had come with me. And I started to notice some things about this person that I was a little bit hesitant about. But again, I wanted it to work so badly, I kept just pushing them away. And I didn't think that it had anything to do with me. So I'm on this trip, and a lot of these are with business associates that or clients that became friends. And all of us are at this amazing house resort, this resort-like place. And I start to notice as I'm there that these friends were newer friends. And so they knew me in a certain way. And I started to notice that when I was around my partner, how different I would act towards them. And then when he wasn't around, how I was just so much more comfortable. And what happened was my daughter actually got sick that night. She got food poisoning, and my friends threw this amazing birthday party for me. It was the sweetest thing that anyone had ever done. It was a total surprise. It was like a mini little wedding. And my daughter is sick upstairs, and I'm feeling pressure to go down to this extravagant party and then also be there for her as she's literally vomiting. And at the time, my boyfriend was enjoying the party the entire time as I was running back and forth, almost completely missing dinner, which was steak and lobster and champagne. And I mean, it was an incredible, incredible party. And no one knew what was going on because I was hiding it from everybody. I didn't want anybody to know that I was in this situation because I wanted my friends to feel good about this thing that they had planned. And so eventually my daughter fell asleep. I was able to go back down to the party. And as I was cutting my cake, I realized I was alone. And then everybody was dancing. And my boyfriend was, I'm not sure where he was, off somewhere. And our very sweet friend came over to me and grabbed my hand. And he said, Amanda, he said, you look so beautiful tonight. Someone should dance with you. And he kind of gave me this look, which basically said, why isn't your boyfriend dancing with you? But I still didn't notice. And the next morning we wake up, my daughter wakes up, and I said to my boyfriend, I said, I'm going to stay one more day. I'm going to stay one more day because Kennedy was sick last night. I don't have anything going on for work tomorrow. I'm going to stay. I'm going to enjoy this. And he got very upset. And he wanted me to go back with him because he had an event that he wanted me to be a part of. And I said, I will do my best to make it back. As long as my flight is on time tomorrow, I'll make it to your event. If there's a delay, I won't be able to be there. And he said this to me. He said, just remember that the next time you need me to be there for something, that remember in this moment that you chose this over this thing that's important to me. He said, so just the next time that happens to you, just remember. And I kind of said, are you threatening me with that? And my daughter, who was in the room, says she had seen some videos from the night before, and she looks at us both and she says to him, just let my mom and I stay. I was sick last night. And she says, and anyway, she said, I don't ever want my mom to marry you. I don't ever want my mom to marry you. She said, you don't even dance with her. And in that moment, I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh my gosh, I've started to notice these things. And my daughter, who's like 6 at the time, thinks this is so incredibly obvious. And I'm literally hit in the face with this thing. I'm like, how did I end up 2.5 years into this? And I didn't even notice. So he ends up leaving. He's not very happy. That same night, I am down with all of our friends and we're bowling. In the previous few nights, we had bowled a couple times. And I mean, I sucked. Like, I was so bad. I could not, I missed a pin every single time. Well, that night, without my boyfriend there, I'm actually bowling a pretty good game. And my client, who's now my friend, who's in his 70s, he comes up to me and he grabs me by the shoulders and he says, Amanda, he said, you are on fire tonight. He said, where was that bowler yesterday and the day before? And he looks at me straight in the eyes and he says, I wonder what's so different about those nights than tonight. And I was silent. And I got on that plane and I left the next day, and flying home, I knew what I had to do. And I realized on that trip, I think it was just being in that environment with people that I had just become close to and realizing that I was not myself. I was not being myself. I was not even comfortable with myself in an environment when we were together. And I don't even know how it happened, but I knew that it was time to break up. And so I did. And as horrible as that was, because I feel like I really broke someone's heart because I told them things that I didn't really feel. And I do feel bad about that, but it was like I wanted them to be so true. So I felt like it was not misleading. And I don't have very many regrets, but if you were to ask me one regret up until that moment in time, I would say that I had none. That's probably my only one, was that I was not honest with myself. And because of that, I let someone believe something that wasn't true. And so the bottom line here is that we need to take time after we end a relationship. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it hurts. Sometimes you feel empty and sad and alone and you're going to cry, but it's not like you're never going to find someone again. And sometimes maybe it's even the opposite. Maybe you're, relieved, invigorated, and wanting to feel refreshed and get back out there. But for your own sake, I've had to remind myself of this many times. And I just got off of this 1 and 9 month break that I knew I was going to have to take. So that way I could be single and fully heal from both of those relationships, from my marriage and from a long-term relationship that was probably a rebound that lasted a very long time. I needed to heal from both of those things. And so I intentionally I said, I'm going to take at least a year. No one will be my boyfriend. I will date no one exclusively. And it's been about 1 and 9 months now. And it's so important to take this time to heal and remember who you are and focus on yourselves and what you've learned from those past relationships and what you really want for the future. Because once you are back to yourself again and you truly feel good about who you are, then you are in your element and can truly be single and find someone that, as Katie would say, is your soulmate, or at least that you're going to share a lot of positive experiences with. That's when you meet incredible people. When you're yourself and when you're engaging and when you're fun. And that's what dating is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about discovering more about yourself and more about others. It's about learning. It's about growing. After I ended that relationship, I gave myself this time and I was finally free and finally single for the first time since I was literally 18 and a half years old. Yeah, it's a little embarrassing. And it felt good though. It felt so good. I was single for the first time in my adult life, and being single in your 30s, I don't know what it was like in my 20s because I missed that. So all y'all can fill me in. I completely missed it. But in your 30s, it's different. In probably some not so good ways, but in some really great ways too. And I had some catching up to do. But I also had some lessons to learn. And these are some lessons I'm going to share in some future episodes, because as I entered the dating world again, I was warned by those much wiser than me, one with dating experience and two with age, that Amanda, you have not dated before. When you were 18, that did not count. It was not the same as it is now. And so do not be naive. You need to be aware of some of the things that you might encounter. It's not always going to be fun and merry, and you cannot trust everyone. Don't go into situations distrusting, but you need to have your guard up just a little bit, because not everybody is who they say they are or what you think they are. And, you always think you take them for face value. And this isn't always going to be the case. And so we warn you. This wasn't just one person. It was probably 20, maybe more, maybe more. And so the first lesson that I did learn, which I'm not going to share with you in this episode, is going to come next, is that we talk a lot about baggage, and sometimes one suitcase is just too many. And it turns out even that one suitcase can fit a lot of baggage. My friends and I would refer to this story as the suitcase guy. And on the next episode, I'm going to share a little bit with you about the suitcase guy and his carry-on. Thanks for listening, everybody. That's your It Girl.